and give their sacrifices up. And then, according to the history, there was like beyond that, there was a court for Israelites which was split between men and women. And the men were closer to, the priestly side of things, and the women, were on the outside. But the women of Israel, they could go in, but there was a specific court which was for Gentiles. They weren't allowed to go into the holy places. And obviously, we know only the Levites and that could deal, the sons of Aaron could deal with the holies of holies, right? So it says here, crying out, men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, which is a lie, because he wasn't teaching against the law and against the temple. And further brought Greeks also into the temple and have polluted this holy place. So they were accusing him of bringing Greeks, heathens, Gentiles into the temple. Now we know that the Greeks that Paul was teaching were Israelites, but that's how strict they were. Unless you could prove that lineage, nah, Rasta, you weren't getting in there. For they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. So they just he must have brought him into the temple. You know what I'm saying? Which he didn't. But that was like a serious violation that they could bring against Paul, and it came with a death penalty. Right? And then so Paul got arrested and this, that, and the other. This is the point I'm trying to make to you, is that Yahweh Shai was in the temple all the time. Alright? Yahweh Shai was you read the gospel, Yahweh Shai was constantly in the temple teaching and dealing with the Pharisees. Now, where do you think that would have been? Right, so this is pbs.org, temple culture. It says the crucial thing to remember is that nowadays there are temples and synagogues everywhere you go. There is not a Jewish community in the world that doesn't have a synagogue, and many of them are called temples. In this period, however, we should always remember that there is only one temple, and that's the one temple in Jerusalem. The building itself was very small. The actual building of the temple could fit inside the infield of any baseball stadium. However, the large structure all around it, the large plaza, the porticos, the columns, the staircases, all of that were built up by Herod the Great on the monumental scale, filling up, I think, something like 10 football fields. So we have then a very large, very conspicuous, grandiose, grand structure in the center of Jerusalem, which attracted pilgrims from near and far, both Jews and Gentile. In the temple itself, which I believe is one of the 7 wonders of the world, we have priests all descending from Aaron, the high priest, back in time, the brother of Moses, the tribe of the priests, who officiated the altar. Now only they could really deal with the Holy of Holies. They slaughtered animals, they took the animal carcasses on the altar, roasted the animals, spattered the blood on the corners of the altar, dispensed the meat and the bones and the blood, and so on, and yada yada yada. It says, let's jump down. Only the priests were actually able to penetrate the innermost areas of the temple. Even full-blooded religious pious Jews could only go near, just get to the outskirts of the temple. Further back, even Gentiles could attend. Now, Yahweh Shai, being an Israelite, evidently, because his father was Joseph, he had the records, could enter into the part where the full-blooded pious Jews could enter. Right? He wouldn't have been allowed, and it would have been a violation for him to be anywhere else. He wouldn't have been. If he didn't have a lineage according to his father, he would have had to chill with the Gentiles. Even though the actual religious ritual of the temple was solely in the hands of the priest, that is, if you brought your sacrifice to the temple because, say, your wife had a baby, say a child recovered from illness, or say you're at a pilgrimage festival and you're celebrating the pilgrimage, so you bring your animal offering to the temple, the priest take it away from you and brings you back the roast beef or roast lamb in a little while, where you and your family sit and eat. Okay, so I want to jump down. It says, could people who weren't Jewish, meaning Israelite, go to the temple? Most temples in antiquity encouraged the respect and patronage of as many people as possible. It's simply good business. And again, in this respect, the Temple of Jerusalem was no different. Gentiles had an area within which they could penetrate the sacred precincts of the temple. They were certainly permitted to give offerings. The temple was organized in terms of degrees of sacred space and the most sacred space was occupied only by the priests, but the Gentiles could bring offerings, would pass it over so that eventually the offering would be offered by the priest on behalf of the Gentile who was making the offering. All right, so the Gentiles, they had the part, but it was in the outer court. You understand what I'm saying? Now I got another article here that I got to tell you where Yahushua was teaching. It says, what did Yahushua think when he saw this stone? An inscription was discovered on a Greek tablet attached to Soreg, forbidding Gentiles to pass beyond that point. Right? So there was a point in the temple where if you weren't an Israelite, evidently, yeah, it was a complete violation to even step across the borderline there. You know, the penalty, hey, it's a serious violation. What's this, man? Move this out of the way. What? Hold on, let me reset this because this thing's blocking up some of the writing here. When King Herod rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem between 19 and 9 BC, he enclosed the outer court with colonnades. The large separate area was referred to as the court of the Gentiles because the Gentiles, non-Jews from any race or religion apparently, were permitted to enter this great open courtyard of the temple area. They could walk within it, but they were forbidden to go any further than the outer court. That's why the book of Revelation speak about the outer court. They were excluded from entering into any of the inner courts, and warning signs in Greek and Latin were placed, giving strict warning that the penalty for such a trespass was death. Now I put to you, this being the case, do you think that Yahushua would have got away with saying that, oh yeah, by the way, Joseph's not my father? They would have said, well, who's his father then? And he went, well, I don't know, it was a virgin birth. You think they would have let man in the temple? You lot, that would have been a point of extreme contention. Because as far as they know, this dude could be a Hamite. Who is he? Like, who's your father? That was never brought up as a point of contention in the scriptures because it wasn't a point of contention. It was evident who the Lord was. That's why he kept all the high holy days and he was rolling with the rest of Israel. The Romans permitted the Jewish authorities to carry out the death penalty for this offense, even if the offender were a Roman citizen. Alright? So, yeah. I want to get down to the part where did Yahushua teach? Yo, I thought that was in this one. Was that in this other one? One second. Right, this is another article. In what areas of the temple did Yahushua teach? Right? Now it says, I understand from one of your articles that when Yahushua cleansed the temple, he cleansed a large court of the Gentiles, but in what parts of the temple did he actually teach? This is an excellent question, and the answer is most significant. We learn from the biblical record that Yahushua taught in several places in the temple of that day, which is known as Herod's temple. You may find a diagram below a helpful reference. Scriptures mention at least these four. The women's court was a location of the temple treasury, and Mark 12:41 indicates that this was a common location for Yahushua to sit and teach. Right? Now, the women's court, that was only for Israelites. That was a part of the temple which was designated onto the Israelites and where women were. Okay. It is also likely that he taught in the area known as the court of Israel, as the sons of Israel, as indicated by Mark 14 and 49 and other passages, because this is the area that the scribes and Pharisees and other Jewish religious leaders frequented while avoiding the court of the Gentiles, and so this would have likely been one of the places of Yahushua's confrontation with them within the temple complex. Okay. It says Yahushua also taught in Solomon's porch, which was a portico on the east side of the temple, the long colonnade behind the holy place in the diagram below. Right. So the point of the matter is that Yahushua, he was up in the court of Israel, and he was, would be in the women's oh, my mother's Mary. Okay, but who's your father? I don't have a father. Wait, that's it, man. You're in trouble. You had to declare your pedigree, man. This was a serious violation back then. And like I said, you'll find nowhere in the scriptures where this was an actual point of contention. You find it with Paul, because they accused Paul of bringing Gentiles into the court of Israel, which he didn't. So why don't you see anyone accusing Yahushua of being a heathen and whatever, and he shouldn't be allowed in the court? That was never a issue, because as it is written, it was evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, and they had his lineage going back to David, going back to Jacob, going back to Abraham via Joseph, right? So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David onto the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon onto Yahushua are 14 generations. And guess what one of those generations is? Joseph. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Yahushua, who is called Hamashiach. Joseph is his father, man. It's only a point of contention today because of this paganry that has been has perverted the doctrine in that institution known as Christianity. It wasn't a point of contention back then, because it would have been a very simple thing. Like, nah, you ain't an Israelite, and you ain't coming up in the temple no more. Furthermore to that, we're gonna put you to death because you're not an Israelite, so you shouldn't be in the temple. That's what we would have been seeing that in the scriptures. They accused him of not being an Israelite because you don't see that there. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna say shalom.